Welcome back to Paperback Ponderings. Today we have a very exciting episode because we have VL Bovalino joining us today. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Very excited to be here.
We are so excited to have you because we absolutely loved The Second Death of Locke.
Thanks.
But for anybody who's tuning in who maybe has not read the book yet and just wants to know a little bit more what it's about. So The Second Death of Locke follows Grey Flynn, who is a knight who has dedicated her life to her mage and childhood best friend Kier. And in this world there are wells, who are people who possess power, and then there are mages, who are the people who wield it. So magic is always performed in these pairings of two like this. And as Kier's well, Grey is his power source, but also his protector on the battlefield, his healer, and his longtime best friend. So when they are tasked with a quest to protect and transport a teenage girl who is believed to be the long-lost heir to the Isle of Locke, which was the source of all the nation's power before it was attacked and disappeared into the sea 16 years ago, Kier and Grey are faced with some pretty hard choices because they have a secret. Grey is actually the long-lost heir to the Isle of Locke, and if she dies, all the magic in the land dies with her. And she has spent the last 16 years now in hiding, not wanting to be found by these kingdoms who are hunting her down. So now with this quest that they know is not legitimate, because they know that this girl is not the heir, they have to decide how far they're willing to go to protect their secret and how closely they want to get involved in the politics of this war and search that they have been hiding from.
Love it when I don't have to pitch the book. Like, everyone's probably like, Tori, you've been talking about this book for like 2 years. I have never gotten it down to like snappy. I've never been snappy about it.
Well, there's so much important info. It's hard to cut it down.
Well, it's because like the world building is so intrinsically tied to the actual like pitch of the book.
Mm-hmm.
So like you have to kind of pitch the world and then pitch the story. And
yes.
That's not snappy, you know?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And especially when you're like your blood, sweat, and tears are in this book and every single component of it came from you. It's like this is mine. How am I supposed? This is my baby. Like, how am I supposed to make it snappy? It's not snappy. Right. There's this, and then this, and then this took me this amount of time, and I had to rewrite this 6 times. And
like, how do I distill the brain nebula into like one sentence?
Yeah, it's all important.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, we wanted to start by just asking you what your inspiration was, what kind of went into the process of creating this book.
Yeah, this book took me a really long time to develop. I started writing novels when I was like a kid, genuinely, and this is one of the second or third concepts that I actually started writing. So I was working on it when I was a teenager, and the original drafts of it were definitely very, very deeply YA. I think Grey was like 16. The childhood friends to lovers didn't exist. Kier was the son of a neighboring kingdom, if I recall correctly. So like everyone who is now dead was also alive. So it was just a lot going on in the brain. The nice thing about that is I recognized when I was a teenager that I just did not have the skill set to do this kind of like epic sweeping fantasy that I wanted it to be. So I shelved it. I worked on other things. I poked it again in 2018 when it was still YA. And then I wrote other books. I have had a career already in publishing young adult horror novels. So when I was working on my Locke is my 5th book. When I was working on my 4th book, which is called My Throat and Open Grave, it was a mentally very difficult space to be in. It's basically like a young girl who's dealing with purity culture and religious guilt, and it's a lot about like socio-political stuff happening in relation to how religions process, the women's role. So all of that was going on, inhabiting that space. My brain was in the sad times, and I just needed something that wasn't so deeply personally depressing, which is ironic considering just how like kind of depressing this book is. But I didn't need it to be that deeply personally depressing, and I wanted it to be a project that made me feel like I loved writing again, like just that kind of joy of creating something that I was missing, I think, in the last couple of projects that I was working on. And that's not to say that I didn't love those projects, but I think it was just when you go from being a writer who writes stuff that they love to being a published author who is, writing to deadline and considering market and things like that, I think it's very easy to lose sight of writing because of the love of writing. All of that's to say, in 2023, when I handed in My Throat in a Grave, I was basically like, I just need to work on something that's purely for me. I was really stressed out about my career. I didn't want to work on something that I was immediately positioning to sell, which is also ironic just because of how the process unfolded after this. I just wanted to work on something that was just purely sweet tooth. And that was this book. Grey and Kier had been with me for, a decade at that point, and I wanted to do the story that I could see in my brain justice, and I felt like now I did have the skill set to do that, because I had been doing, a couple of books. So I pulled it out again and started working on it in, I want to say like December of 2022 or January of 2023. The first draft, I wrote it in 6 weeks. Like, it just happened. And it was one of those processes that I loved every single time that I was in that world. I loved every time that I got to work on that book. And even through edits, like, I didn't lose my love for it, even as like things were happening in publishing that stressed me out greatly. Sorry, that was so long-winded.
No.
Not at all. I was gonna say it came through, and it's almost like your experience of your first draft is our experience of our first consumption. To me,
Yes.
It was very like the pace was great. It was like, I am constantly wanting to pick this up. It's not like there was too much going on. Like, it was so consumable. And it was kind of a whirlwind for the reader, too, to just, like, sit in this world and want to come back to it day in and day out.
I'm honestly thrilled with that. I think with this book specifically, like, the pacing is so intentional. And coming from YA, in YA, you really want the inciting incident to be fairly early. And that's, one of the conventions of that. And with this, stuff happens. Like, not a spoiler, we stab Kier in chapter 2, but like we don't really get to the meat of why things are happening and kind of the inciting incident of it all until like 80 pages in, which is pacing that I wouldn't have been able to do in another genre, or if my publisher didn't trust me to do that.
So what was that like coming from YA to adult? Like, was it a hard transition in that sense?
I don't think it was hard in the sense of, like, to a degree, books are books. Like, the actual writing process was, it was just sitting down and writing a book. I think in terms of considering the voice, my thoughts around that changed because when I was writing YA protagonists, it's not necessarily like I'm pulling any punches, but I'm definitely thinking about how the content that I'm presenting would read to a 14-year-old, because you have to think of like school libraries and things like that. And even though I was writing about like difficult things with violence and gore and hot button school topics like sexuality, all of that was coming from me thinking of the teenage reader. And also that impacted how information was paced and how things were structured. And realistically, we wanted to cut the book off by like 90,000, 100,000 words. Going from that to Locke, it was kind of like I could just unfurl a little bit. Like, I didn't have to think of all of those things. I think the voice is a little bit more me in a lot of ways, just like Grey's sense of humor and the things that she thinks about and the things that she worries about. And again, not pulling any punches, but the way I was able to show this information was, considering a different reader. So I wasn't thinking about the teenage reader. I was thinking about readers who are my age and are interested in the things that I'm interested in. And so it was a book that I was writing for present me versus past me. And I really enjoyed that process.
Do you see yourself sticking more with adult in the future, or do you think you'll kind of go back and forth between genres?
I think it's hard to say right now. I think my thing with YA at this very second is I have a lot of respect for people who write YA, but I think the market itself has changed so much to, in some cases, I don't know if we're always keeping the teenager in mind. Because, like, I mean, if you think about young adult, like, it's young adult, sorry. But, like, I don't think as much stuff that's coming out right now, and this is not a knock on anyone, it's a marketing question. I don't think all of it is kind of thinking of that 14-year-old. So for me, I don't necessarily know if I will keep up doing YA right now. I think I'll come back to it in the future. I also don't know what the kids want these days. Like, I feel quite disconnected from, like, teen culture. Maybe I'm just old now. I don't know. But, like, I feel quite disconnected from it. And then I also, weirdly, the fundamental thing I've been kind of dealing with is I grew up in the States, but I've been living in the UK for, like, most of my adult life. So, like, nearly 8 years at this point.
Mm.
And so I don't know if the cultural touch points that I now am aware of are transatlantic, and I don't know if, like, I'm writing something that's so deeply outdated about life in the States that, you know, teenagers who are harsh critics are gonna be like, that's absolutely not how it works. But then I don't know, because I didn't grow up in the UK, like, I don't know enough about, like, stuff, like, education and things to be like, yeah, this is what an A level is.
True. Yeah,
So-
because their system is quite different.
Yeah, exactly. So I think just contextually, I've gotten around it by always having things kind of set in the summer or during school breaks, but, like, my book that comes out in January, there's a lot of school in it, and I'm just like, I think we still do school the same way.
Yeah, you're like, I'm relying on my editor here to
Yeah.
correct me. Yeah.
Right. But I feel like, hello, fellow kids. So we'll see. I think if I have a really good idea for something, possibly second world fantasy or horror, like, I'll come back for it. Or if I have something that works with, like, a UK narrator, maybe. But my next 4 books are all adult. 4, 5, who knows? My next few books,
Okay.
everything that I have under contract after January is adult. So we shall see.
Nice.
So exciting.
We are very excited
We
about
are
that.
excited.
Yay! No, I'm excited. It's that whole brain unfurling thing. Like, it feels more like who I am now.
It sounds like a bit of a breath of fresh air. Like, I don't need to think so hard about the narration, so I can focus on the story or the world. I can focus on the characters. Not that you weren't doing that in the YA world, but it sounds like it just felt like you had to be extra mindful, extra on, and less
absolutely
natural in your process.
Yes. 100%. And I think also I've kind of run out of ideas in YA for, like, the current moment. But we'll see. I'm just tired,
That's okay.
maybe.
You can let your well refill.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you have, when it comes to your adult future, your future in adult worlds, what does the process itself in terms of, like, sitting down to write? You mentioned your first draft of Locke went really quickly. Some people, change their story quite drastically.
Yeah.
What are your go-to tactics to get in the mood for writing? And how did this story evolve over that? I know originally very, very different from what it was, but maybe from that, like, first draft to final publication, what were the big changes or the big kind of hurdles that you went through along the way?
Yeah, I think the nice thing about the fact that I started when I was very young is I know my processes really, really well now. So I'm an outliner, but I basically do the first 3 chapters of a first draft, just exploration. And once I hit that 3-chapter point, and I'll make notes as I go, but once I hit that 3-chapter point, like, we're locked in. I either know if it's a viable project that I'm going to finish, maybe not necessarily, like, go past that, or if it's, going to go in a drawer forever and ever and ever. So after I hit 3 chapters on the first draft, I essentially make an outline, and then I just chronologically just write the whole thing. I don't stop. I kind of give myself, like, a solid block of time and say, this is drafting time. Don't stop. If I come up with something that I desperately need to change in the first draft, I will basically leave a comment to myself saying, hey, I'm changing this thing, and then I'll write the rest of it as if I've already changed it. And then this, for me, makes it a less tedious editing process. After I finish the first draft, which usually takes me somewhere around 2 to 3 months, I kind of put the project down for a little bit, let it marinate, let my brain sit. If I have anything that I think of during that time, like I'll make a note of it. I just keep a phone note for edits for every book. Make note of it during that time, and then I go back to it, do a complete page 1 rewrite with those notes in mind. And I usually do this at least 1 complete rewrite, usually 2. And at that point, it goes to whomever is the gatekeeping reader at that point, whether that's my agent, if it's a book that's not yet sold, or if it's my editor, if it's a book that, you know, it's under contract for whatever reason. So beyond that, big things that changed with Locke, especially. So in the earliest drafts, so in like 2013, it was definitely like a medieval world. And in those drafts, when I was thinking of the kind of world building aesthetic, I was very much into Game of Thrones. So a lot of it was that kind of world where you had medieval fantasy, sword and sorcery, everything happening there. When I pulled it out again in 2023, in the first draft that I did there, I made everything more of like a World War One situation. So it was more like legitimate armies, like camps and things like that. Not like grounded World War, I suppose, because I'm really not like a military history person in any way, shape, or form. Like what I know, I've had to learn through books, or I've been told, or I learned in school. You know, like I don't go outwardly seeking that kind of content in nonfiction. But either way, it was a huge aesthetic shift in how the world building was constructed. And then when it was acquired, that became pretty much the biggest sticking point, was this incongruous world building, because the first part, which takes place mostly at a camp, was this like deeply established World War One situation with swords. And then once we left camp, it's a quest narrative, you know? And then once we get to parts 3 and 4, there's more of this kind of like Winterfell aesthetic that's coming in. So it was not matching up. So we revised, did everything as more like quote unquote nightcore, but really European medieval fantasy. So this was really interesting in hindsight, because I'm sure, as we all know, knights have become a bit of a trend for the fall.
It's the
like,
year of the lady knight.
It is, but like none of that was intentional. And like even people I know who we were all working on like night books at the same time, none of us until like early this year were like, hey, wait a second. This is a thing.
Yeah, well, it seems like you and there's a few other Lady Knight books this year are just like the pioneers of the new Lady Knight movement that's happening. But because this year seems to be the start of it, you wouldn't have known that going into writing.
Yeah, and this is what I say because I teach writing as well, but this is what I say to people, like my students especially, who are asking about writing to trend or scrapping something because it's not to trend. That's not how trends work. Like, by the time the trend is happening, it's 18 months too late in a lot of cases to hop onto it. And like, I ran into this in a really weird way with my first book, which was dark academia YA horror, before the dark academia boom and before the horror boom. So like, we can't keep track of when these things are happening. We can't anticipate them, and we can't write to them. I think within traditional publishing timelines, I think it's a little bit different when we have like self or indie pub, just because like you have more control over the timeline and like things can be turned around quicker. But with a trad pub timeline, which is like 18 to 24 months minimum, difficult.
Yeah. And then like if you're writing to trend too, you're not being as authentic to yourself and the story that you want to be telling.
Yeah, I think it's hard when people get like deeply inspired by these things, because I know, for example, like 2 of my biggest inspirations when I went back were Six Deaths of the Saint and Gideon the Ninth, and also Fire by Kristen Kishore, which is old.
Yes, I loved that series.
Love that series, and that was the whole thing. Oh, and also The Green Knight the Dev Patel Green Knight. And I think so many of us had that single brain cell of like, yeah. And it developed from there.
How did the actual story develop? The relationship between the characters, the character arcs themselves. What did that look like? Because Kyla and I are obsessed with the love story in this book, and just how much you loved every character in it. The side characters, the main characters, like the found family, the environment in general. What did it look like to develop those folks, those individuals on page?
I'm really glad that it translates, because like I do genuinely like love them so much, which is so weird to say. Like I created them. They're my little things that I move around a board. Basically, something that I think of structurally with a lot of my books is I want the first kind of 3 parts or first 2 parts to ask a question, and then the final act to answer the question. So that was kind of where I was approaching it structurally from that perspective. And it's funny how like I think of the plot of the book in my head versus like what it is in the book itself, because I always think the quest is like a lot longer. Like I think there's a lot more space given to it, but realistically it's a quarter. So it's just little quest. But so I think going from that, I am a very character driven writer. Definitely the things that I'm writing, I'm not necessarily thinking about like how plot impacts character. I'm thinking more so about how like character impacts plot. Like I don't want any of it to be, well, this thing happened to me, so I'm gonna do this. It's like a series of decisions. So yeah, I'm very character driven, but I want all of those characters to be realistic, and by that I mean like I want every single one of them to feel like they have a history before we step into it. And I don't always get a lot of space to do that in like a 90,000 word book. But Locke is like 140k, so we had a lot more room to expand. Part of the development for that was I did a lot of side quests. So I wrote a lot of stuff around the book. I wrote like an entire prequel novella for characters that don't they're dead. It's fine. Characters who just aren't in the book. I wrote a lot of Grey and Kier. Like I basically like take AO3 prompts and just like run them through that. And that really helped me to kind of develop the relationship over the years. So then by the point that we get to the book itself, it feels like they have lived this. Like there isn't a sense, well, I hope that there isn't a sense that they just spring up on the first page and we start moving with them.
Oh no.
And I think like structurally, again, that push-pull of being in the present and then getting something from the past, whether it's a little flashback scene or one of Grey's memories or how her memories have informed what's happening now, having that push-pull was really helpful for me to kind of establish that and bring some of that pre-writing in, even if it didn't come in itself. Yeah, in terms of the side characters, I was actually quite surprised myself by how that all happened. There was never really meant to be that huge found family aspect. And genuinely, like, when I was like, oh, they've got to go on a quest. It probably shouldn't just be them on a quest, because that would be weird. Like, 2, angry people and then this teenager. Like, that's such a weird dynamic. I need other people to go on this quest. I literally flipped back to like chapter 3 or whatever, and I was like, well, let's just see what other characters we've already made. And that's how Ola, Britt, and Aaron came along, because I think one of them was supposed to be just like a very, very minor character called Chappelle, but one of them was meant to be Chappelle, and I was like, ugh. Leave him alone at camp. And then like, yeah, so I think they were just there out of consequence of me needing other people in an earlier scene. And then when it came to, oh, we need more people again, they're coming along. And then and then it was this like development of, well, they need personalities too. And they need dynamics between the 3 of them and between the 5 of them. And also Grey doesn't trust anyone. So how does this all work? So it just developed like really naturally in this really fun way that I don't think I've experienced before when writing like a group of characters. Like characters will always surprise you, which sounds weird and slightly pretentious because it is just your brain. But I don't think I have ever had characters like that who surprised me so, I guess, consistently. And as I kept writing it, that was something that I cared about, was fleshing them out, making them feel like, you know, lived in characters as well. And I think especially with these sort of like war narratives, it's really easy to just have people be expendable. And when there's so much focus on royalty and kings and queens and all of these things, like we tend to lose sight of the regular everyday people. And so that was kind of something that I also wanted to think about, was she may be a high lady in hiding, but everyone around her isn't. Like, Kier's just some kid. He just happened to be in proximity. And that's everyone else as well. Like, they weren't specially selected for this, really. They didn't grow up into this. It was just proximity. So, like, how do you take characters who have no training for these things? It's just a matter of chance, and then expand that. And that's kind of where they all came from. I know that's... I wish I could say, like, yeah, Ola was who she was from the very first day, but no. And she's actually one of my favorite characters now. Like, I love Ola, but I think there's so much of her that I didn't actually get onto the page. Like, I had to cut, like, 2 scenes, and I'm quite sad about it. But it's fine.
Maybe a bonus chapter someday.
Maybe. I've been dropping, like, little bonus snippets in my newsletter, so I might dig one out. Who knows?
Oh, I need to sign up for that in that case.
Yeah, me too. I was thinking through the book, like, oh, I would have loved to know what that scene looked like from that perspective. You know?
I am doing some Kier point of view. Like, I did one last month, and I'm doing one this month as well. So
Oh, exciting. Okay.
because I do have, like, background thing. I do have actually quite a lot of stuff in Kier's perspective, just because it's an unrequited relationship of like 16 years. Like, what's going on there?
Yeah. I was telling Sarah, it's funny that you mentioned Game of Thrones as kind of an early setting influence. I was telling Sarah that in my mind, I was envisioning Brit as Brienne of Tarth.
Yes. I have like an entire, basically, like, when we were doing art, so I commissioned some art, and then I also had like a couple of editions that required art, basically. So I have like a big PowerPoint of character descriptions, motifs, setting descriptions, and things like that. And Brienne is definitely on the Brit page.
There's
some other people too. I'm trying to remember who else is on the, either way. But yes, so that's the vibe.
I'm glad that I got that right in my mind.
Yes.
That did come through.
One thing I wanted to talk about was the yearning, okay? The yearning between Grey and Kier was so good. I told Sarah that I squealed out loud, I think, like, the first kiss. I literally was like... And I read a lot of romance. I don't squeal out loud very often, right? So it was so potent, and I just wanted to know, like, how did you get it to be at such a boiling point that the readers are like, oh my god,
Is this gonna happen?
Yeah.
It's because they're dumb. It's that, like, again, using fanfic tropes, because I grew up on fanfic, you know? It's so clearly, like, idiots to lovers. Like, they're just not very... They're emotionally smart in a lot of ways, but not when it comes to one another. But I think contextually, all of that yearning is, like, yearning works really well when there's a logistical and physical and whatever reason why it remains as yearning. And also I think yearning works really well in books as opposed to in real life, because if we were just, like, mildly obsessed with someone for, like, a full decade, that's a lot.
Yeah.
You know, for, like, a real person. Like, we've all had our moments of being mildly obsessed with someone, and it having it be, like, unreciprocated, or not wanting to confess our feelings, or having some other reason that makes perfect logical sense in our heads why this doesn't work. But as people, like, eventually, in most cases, we move on. And I think that kind of search for yearning is, if we're looking at fiction as, like, both wish fulfillment and fantasy, imagine that you did have that sustained moment, and then it was reciprocated, and everything ended up well. Because it so rarely ends up that way in real life.
Yeah.
With Grey and Kier specifically. And yeah, like I'm a hopeless romantic. And I think that I love like a childhood best friends to lovers story just because I think there's something so, I guess, poignant about somebody who knows you that well and for that long and still loves you anyways. And even knowing who you were when you were terrible as a teenager. Like, I think in one of the background things, you know, Grey is constantly like kicking Kier in the shins because that's like what teenagers do, you know?
Yeah.
So I basically was keeping all of that in mind with the yearning, and realistically, there are a few reasons why neither of them ever admit it. And I didn't ever want to come out and say, like, I don't think he loves me back, because that's not true. Like, I think from the very first chapter, it's very clear to the reader and to them that they love one another. It's just this question of like how. And then within that as well, their relationship is too complicated to ruin it in a lot of ways. So if we really think about how like contextually it works, Kier's brother died like because of Grey. And Grey's whole family is dead. And they don't really have anyone else in the world who knows all of their secrets other than the other person. And like for Grey, yeah, she's also like, well, you know, he's into everyone, so of course he's also flirting with me. And for Kier, I think it's a bit like, I am the only person in the world that she still has and is still honest with, so I cannot cross that boundary out of respect and out of safety in a lot of ways, because I don't want her to think that this is, like, I don't want her to think it's conditional, like my affection. And then when you kind of layer onto that both of them are queer, I don't know, I think, like, a lot of queer people have had these deeply interesting and layered relationships where it's like platonic, but you know, like there's still that question there, and I think that just adds another layer of questioning. Sorry, that was such a cyclical sentence. It just adds that other layer of, I don't know if this is something I'm imagining, I don't know if this is wishful thinking, I don't know if this is real, I don't know if this is reciprocated. I don't know if this is even an option for this person, just because of the way attraction works. And I think that was all really important to me to convey. And, you know, I have had, like, I'm also, like, a very affectionate person, like, in my friendships and in my relationships as well. And I think it's really difficult when you're a very, like, huggy, touchy-feely person to also draw that differentiation between, like, what is romantic affection and what's platonic affection.
Yeah, I think you did a really good job with that, because every time, sometimes authors keep characters apart, and the reasons, like, as a reader, you're like, but no. In this case, it was very understandable why Grey would look at Kier and be like, oh, he's just flirty with everyone. That's just how he is. Like, we just have this really deep friendship, and all the reasons she was telling herself were valid, and I could see why she would talk herself out of it.
Yeah.
But
I mean, also weirdly, like, in terms of other character references, in the earlier drafts as well, like Mal and Alina from Shadow and Bone, like have a very kind of similar character dynamic to Grey and Kier. And yeah, so that is one where it's a question of, is he just noticing me now because I have power? And I didn't want that to be a question, because she's always been like deeply powerful, but also she's always been the deeply powerful root of Kier's magic. So that's another thing that's like, okay, well, if I mess this up, like, I'm never going to do magic again. Great.
yeah,
So yeah.
I think
The relationship.
yes. I will say, every time she pushed power at him and he like groaned, I was like, oh my god.
I got an edit comment that was like, is this supposed to be hot? And I was like,
It was hot.
I don't know.
I was wondering, like, so, you know, in vampire books, sometimes in the spicy scenes, you get the blood sucking, and that's like another element to the spice. And I was like, is this going to happen in this book, where the pushing power at him is another element to the spice a little bit?
I mean, like, it's not explicitly written that way, but I think there is a level of that. And, like, there's also some level of that, like, after the end of the book, they often cannot untether just because of logistical reasons. So yeah, so it was that really interesting kind of dynamic of, I can read your emotions through this. How does that function in other scenes?
Yes.
Diplomatically.
So
I
here
loved
for it.
that element. I really enjoyed that they could send reassurance back and forth, like really intangible feelings that you obviously would not get out of any other relationship. But I found it it was almost like it amped up the yearning even more. The fact that she would like untether so she could have her yearning moments.
Yeah.
In the
She was
beginning
like,
of the book, she's like, no, he can't
Blocked.
know. Yeah, blocked. Emotionally blocked.
Emotionally blocked. I mean, this was a huge influence of Fire by Kristen Cashore again. In that Fire and Brigand do have that kind of mental link, but also with mental links in a lot of cases, they have the ability to communicate words. And I wanted to be very clear that they cannot do words. They can barely do pictures, like maybe at a stretch. I think there's one scene where Grey tries really, really hard and gets like a picture across. But I wanted it to be clear that like we cannot directly speak to each other through this mental link. So like everything that you're understanding about my emotions are also being processed through your feelings. So like if he's reading her emotions, it's through his own biases and vice versa. And so like she says at a couple points of she doesn't know if he's translating her feelings correctly, and vice versa. So yeah, that was just another thing that I liked poking that.
Yes. And another thing with the characters too, I also wanted to point out with Severin and Lot, both of them, despite being dead from the beginning of the story, really felt so alive within the story. Like, you did such a good job of making us care about these characters who have already been gone, and I just wanted them to be around.
I genuinely... Okay, so Severin and Lot were both alive in like the early drafts. And then when, I pulled it out again, I was like, nah. And I
need more pain.
Exactly. But I genuinely had a moment when I finished the draft of like the 2023 draft. When I finished it, I was like, are there any significant changes that I want to make? And part of me was like, bring Severin back.
Yes.
Bring him back. Because when I killed them, like, these are characters who have been alive for me for a decade. And so I like was really sad about it. Like, I kind of weirdly felt that loss because they, in previous versions, had played such a big role. So, like, Severin's existence was a big part of the inciting incident of, like, an earlier draft. And in, like, one of the previous Mishy-Mashy drafts, I think Grey was betrothed to Kier's brother. Like, there was all this, like, weirdness happening of they existed and had so many different versions, and then for me to be like, you're out.
Yeah.
Done. I think that was like, it was hard for me as a writer to say this is what's best for the narrative, but it also kind of really sucks for these characters who, like, I think there are so many interesting things that they could be doing. So I wanted that impression of them haunting the narrative to keep, sustaining. I didn't want it to be something that we heard about in the first or second chapter and never revisited again, because that's also not how grief works from a personal view. We don't lose people and move on by chapter 3, even 10, 15 years later, 20 years later, 100 years later, if we live that long, which we don't, you still think of that person. And especially when it's somebody you've lost young, and they were young as well, you think of all the things and the people that they could have become, and all the ways that they could have had an impact, on the world. And so to me, that was very important that we see that from both of them, because I think in Grey's perspective as well, like, if Severin had lived, it would be an entirely different story.
Yeah.
And, for Kier, if Lot had lived, I don't know if he and Grey would be in the same sort of situation that they are now. So, yeah, I just wanted it to be, like, I wanted it to feel real. But also, there was that little element of grief for me as someone who was losing characters who I did quite like. I always find that hard when... And I've been writing long enough that it's happened a few times that there's somebody who you're genuinely like, I really like this character. I think they have, a huge importance to the narrative. And then it's just like, Gotta go.
Yeah.
Are we going to get any stories of those characters? Like bonus content? I'm thinking
Oh.
specifically of the scene, like Severin's last scene, alive.
Ooh.
Ooh. I've not written it, but it's not like I wouldn't write it.
I
We
would
get
absolutely read that for the pain.
I have done a lot of like, because the weird thing is that, so without giving away spoilers, like in book 2, we spend a lot of it like on Locke and the cultural nuances of that, which Grey is trying to uphold. Even though she's a minor character, the cultural nuances of that like really play into how we are processing like the things that are happening. So a lot of my background writing has been what was Idistra like before all of this stuff happened, and what were kind of the contributing factors to the decimation of the Isle. And then if Grey's trying to go back to some of those cultural touchstones, like how does that work or not work? So that would actually be very good and helpful
Yeah.
side writing. I think that, yeah, the closest I'd gotten to that was the interlude, which I was really on the fence about whether or not to include it or not, just because it felt, I don't know, it felt very convenient. And I wrote it like 3 or 4 times because it took me a long time to feel like I had gotten it right, just with everyone's motivations at play. But yeah, so I think I would potentially go back. I have a scene from Kier's perspective, like finding out about Lot dying, which I think is going in the
Oh.
newsletter like tomorrow.
Oh my gosh.
So I was just like weeping as I wrote it. It's fine. So yeah, we'll see some other bits and pieces that involve those two.
I want to ask more about, you touched on book 2 a little bit, but I'm gonna
You
wait.
can.
Can we ask?
Yeah, you can ask. When is the podcast coming out?
Thursday, the 11th.
Okay, so I am just looking at the calendar. So we're actually like revealing the title and stuff on the 11th. So part of me
really?
is like, part of me is like, shall we just do it?
Do it!
Yeah, I mean, okay, so yes, we're doing it live. It's fine. So the book is called The Thief and the Traitor Bride, and it's not about Grey and Kier technically. It's about a woman called Eleanor Gordon, and she is a wine trader and also a spy for the Lindel throne. And Linden is the nation that Sela was in before she traveled back to Idistra. So it's like they're like downstairs neighbor. That's not like a real way we explain geography. But so Nor is sent on a quest. Is it really a quest? Nor is sent on a mission to basically reestablish a spy connection, like a spy web in Idistra, and also do some things which I'm not going to say yet. And she has to travel with an Idistran who is also a thief, and the thief has a different task to steal something from Locke, and the thief is her estranged husband. So it's like it's very different in terms of like emotional pacing, in that Grey and Kier from the very first page, like we know that they love one another. Nor and Cass are like, you can die. Like, I hate you more than anything I've ever hated before.
Switching it up big time here.
Switching it up, and then they have to work together. And I love it. I love it very much.
Oh, that's so fun. I was so curious about whether book 2 would be about characters we've already seen. Like Ola, we know at the end of book 1 here, she's got a little romance budding. So I wasn't sure if it would be like characters we knew or totally new characters. This is so fun.
Totally new. Funnily enough, Ola's partner does play like weirdly a larger role, I think, than Ola.
Okay.
In this book. So that was an interesting one. Yeah, I knew it was specifically something I wanted to do was like a genuine perspective shift on, we've seen all of these characters from one perspective, and now we're going to see them from a different perspective of people who actively dislike them. And that was something, because when I was writing the end of Locke, Grey makes a couple of decisions that I don't actually agree with as like a person living in the world. And so I was very curious going into it, like how other people who weren't on Grey's side would react to these decisions.
Interesting.
Yeah,
That's an interesting perspective to be able to put yourself in, and then for the reader to absorb. I'm so excited.
Yeah. I'm excited. I think it is completely a standalone though. So Grey and Kier, though they do factor into it, like, are side characters in very different perspectives. Grey's not the villain, it's fine. But yeah, so it will be interesting if anybody reads this book first as a standalone and then is like, wait a second, let's go back to the first one, and then see the perspective shift. I'm very
So
curious.
would you say that people can do it that way, or do you recommend?
Yeah.
Okay.
If everything works the way it should, which is, the scary thing about my job. Like, if I do my job correctly, you should just be able to pick up Trader Bride and read it and then pick up Locke without any sort of knock-on effects.
Okay. And I know this is very ahead of the game, but do you already know who book 3
I
is
do
about?
know who book 3 is.
Okay. I know you
It
can't
is
talk
someone
about that
we've
yet,
met.
but
Yeah, I can't
okay.
say more than that, but it is 100% someone we've met. I'm like, I write really far ahead of deadline just for anxiety reasons, truly. So
Yes,
I'm
fair.
like, yeah. Well, I think so. I finished book 2 last year. Like, I finished drafting book 2.
okay.
I'm now editing it, but just because I was like, I'm too afraid that if people hate Locke, yikes. If people love Locke, that's also equally scary. Because pressure. So yeah, I wrote it last year mostly, and then I moved on to book 3. I'm like 30,000 words into that, but it's on the back burner while I do everything with book 2, and then another book, and then it's back up to bat again.
Okay. And are we on Thursday getting the title reveal or the cover reveal?
Title.
Okay.
Cover is still very much a work in progress. Yeah, sorry, I was just thinking of have I seen anything? No. Nah, I imagine cover will be like spring next year. Who knows? Not me.
Okay. I'll be eagerly awaiting that.
I know what it looks like. Or, sorry, I not know what it looks like. I know what we're doing for it. I think it will be like Locke, but different.
Okay. Maybe a different like color scheme a little bit or something.
Yeah.
Fun.
The magic system in Locke was very unique. And correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm misremembering, but in Linden, it also was a different magic, a different kind of magic. Are we going deep into that world? How do these worlds interplay? You don't have to answer this if you can't.
No, I actually love this question because it's driving me up a wall, specifically because, yes, within the world, every single place has a different magic system. And so book 2 focuses a lot on magic theory, simply because, like, one big thing about being a good thief is being able to move between magic systems. So Caspian is what's called an amalgamate, and he's able to go from system to system within reason, but he's able to, like, use more than one magic system, basically, to great effect. But it's been a lot of theory about something that doesn't actually exist, obviously. So unfortunately that means that I have to make it up. And sometimes it's I make it up as I go, but then it's setting rules for myself then I also have to follow. Yeah. It's just been
complicated.
deeply, deeply stressful.
I can imagine building any sort of magic system is one in which you can get yourself into trouble pretty quickly if you build in enough rules, but you also need them. And I think the complex magic system, complex in the sense that anything that requires 2 people to make it happen is going to be more complex than one person and their willpower and magic making things happen.
Yes. Yeah, and I was very
curious.
strict that, like, I had to follow the rules that I'd set. Like, I could not break the rules. And with that said, Grey could have special abilities, but they also had to make sense within the context of the rules. And so, like, obviously the most special thing that she can do is she can take power away from people, which no one else can do. And so that didn't come, I think, until the second draft, just because it was that question of, is this a rule that I actually want to have? Like, what are the implications of that? Like, how can she use it? How does she use it? And when is it? And what are the consequences of that? And so it does have, consequences to her as a person and bodily and whatnot. But I think with magic systems, like, everyone has different perspectives on how many rules they should and shouldn't set for themselves, whether like they can follow them, whether they can break them. I know for me as a writer, I find it a lot easier to have, for my understanding, like a hard magic system, that I do have the defined rules, even if I'm not conveying all of them to the reader, because I need to know how it functions for me to write little scenes, you know? And so sometimes the reader doesn't know all the rules that I know, vice versa.
Yeah.
Hopefully not. But yeah.
I really, really liked this magic system in the sense, even I'm thinking specifically of the scene when they're in the village, the hotel.
The inn. Hotel, motel, Holiday Inn, yeah.
The Holiday Inn on the way to the mountain.
Yeah.
And it's just Britt and Grey, and they have to fight, but they're constrained by the choices that Grey has made, the illegal choices that Grey has made. And yeah, I just found, like, I loved that was a component in that scene, because that caveat to the magic system made it much more dynamic and put borders around what needed to be done, and also pushed the characters outside of the magic when they needed to be pushed outside of the magic, which I really enjoyed.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it's so interesting what the limitations are. And I think when I was writing that whole section where, you know, Grey and Kier, dedicated magic, yay! Like, I think, you know, in some cases it's like, okay, well, what's the problem with that? It's like, here, I'll show you the problem with that. This is why we shouldn't do it.
Yeah.
And, like, realistically, if it was a peacetime situation, that wouldn't necessarily be a problem. You know? And that was that question of, like, why did these rules appear after the decimation of Locke? Like, why do these things matter? Why have these laws impacted the magic system? And yeah, that's basically the crux of it. But yeah, I had a great time with that scene. I think the most stressful part of it was, like, the setup, because I knew I needed to get them into a position where they were fighting. And, like, in the previous draft, Ola was on the supply run with Kier and Aaron, and it was just Britt, Grey, and Seela. But that doesn't make any sense. So it's like, okay, why doesn't Ola stay behind? And then the next question was, okay, well, for this fight to happen, Ola has to be doing something. So I just sent her off to do laundry. And that was probably the dumbest decision that, you know, has impacted the thoughts of the book. But yeah, she had to do something. Like, she had to get out of there.
Yeah.
And that's that whole thing of, like, how do you write limitations while still sticking to the rules? And I just needed her out of the building.
Yeah. But
And then it
worked.
also, it put them in a position where they could grow in their friendship, because Ola is naturally very angry with Grey afterwards, and that's something they have to overcome, and just helps create more of that loyalty between them down the line.
Yeah, and I think Grey has the struggle that she doesn't fully have this understanding that people can be angry with you and still love you. And just with the way her life has unfolded, she really struggles with this idea of, I guess, forgiveness in a lot of cases. Like, you don't have to be just trusting of one person. You can trust more than one person. And just because you make a mistake doesn't mean people are going to die, which, you know, bad example of that. But, you know, you can move on from mistakes, and there is life after that.
Yeah. Also, on the subject of the magic system, I thought it was really interesting that you have these power dynamics with the two-person system. And we see situations like with Master Addis and Mare, who have a very different power dynamic in their pairing than Kier and Grey do. And how Wells are often, like, they're not allowed to provide their opinions at these war meetings, even though they're very much a part of both the war and very connected with their person who is in charge, kind of thing. So
Yes.
because not everybody has power on their own, right? So you have the mages are seen as, like, the commanders, the ones in control, but they don't have anything if they don't have their well.
Yeah.
So just very interesting.
I think for this, that's always coming from a position of what is, you know, how influence works, essentially. And so quiet power versus loud power, shall we say. When I was establishing this, I was thinking of, okay, here was a situation during Locke's existence. Here is a situation after its decimation, and here is the situation of the scenes that we're following in which it's 20 years past. And so my thoughts and background writing of the world pre-Locke is that, you know, if this marriage between different like sovereigns and things like that carries an influx of power to that place. So Grey's aunt was married to someone in Nestria, so when Locke fell, like, Nestria was very powerful, they had a lot of wells. Grey's father is Scalen, so when Locke fell, Scala had a lot of wells. So, like, these places were just naturally a little bit stronger. But I think that sort of the influence of power follows the influence of the family can cause like a lot of resentment, which obviously led to all the stuff that happened. So I really wanted to emphasize that resentment was not just following these people, but also like the power system as a whole, because it's so deeply like out of the control of people who technically have control of the nation. So it's not like, especially after the fall of Locke, it's not like Scalus can be like, haha, we've got loads of wells, we're gonna keep, you know, hanging on. So yeah, so I think that dynamic, I think, existed pre-decimation, but is really exacerbated in the world that we step into. And yeah, there's genuinely the sense of like, wells are seen and not heard. I think something that was interesting with that for me was making sure that Kier and Grey were on a level footing at every point, especially when this is the world that they've grown up in, that's not something that they want to embody. And so with Kier's decision-making process, pretty much every time he made a decision, I want it to be something that they came to together as a decision. And obviously, when things happen later and things aren't working that way, like, that's a huge tension point, because if Kier says, you know, all of these decisions that I've made, I've done it with you in mind, I want the reader to be actually able to look back and be like, yeah, actually, every single time he has a decision to make, he's like, hey, Grey, what do you think?
Yeah.
So I wanted that equal footing to stand out within the rest of the world. And I think Britt and Ola are a good, like, normal people metric in terms of, like, they're kind of solid mid-ground. Like, they're not, like, completely obsessed with each other. They work together really well. There's some, like, questions. But they just work together really well, versus Grey and Kier, who are obviously obsessed with each other, versus Mare and Addis, who have this like really weird kind of dynamic. Yeah.
That came out. I almost had a moment where I was like, are we gonna get a prequel here? There seems to be more to the story than what I'm gathering. And I don't know if that's intentional or if I'm reading into this too much, but I felt like they had a really fascinating dynamic. Obviously no spoilers here, but I kept going back to them very randomly.
No, that was definitely intentional. And I think it's this whole setup of like, to be a well is the official position, is to die for someone. Like, that's kind of what's expected of them in a lot of cases. And so Addis doesn't necessarily acknowledge that that's how their relationship is. But, like, Mare knows exactly what her role is, both in the, you know, Scalen army and also to her mage. Like, she knows that she's gonna die. She basically tells Grey in chapter 1, she's like, we're basically gonna die here. And it's probably gonna be, like, Clara Addis's fault. And she's just, like, chill with it.
Yeah.
I guess not chill with it. I think she's like, I'm in too deep. You've got to get out.
Yeah. I did really appreciate, without spoilers, the scene.
I'm so bad at without spoilers.
It's hard.
I know.
But you'll both know what I'm talking about, where we have a bit of emotion shown from Addis.
Yes.
And I really liked that we got to see that side of her and her respect for her hand at the same time as knowing that she's a very, like, duty over everything kind of person. So yeah, that.
Yeah, but at the same time, I was very much, it was important that she never shows that to Mare.
Yeah. That came through. That definitely
Yes.
came
Oh,
through.
good. I'm glad.
So many good. Oh, just Sarah and I were talking. We're like, we just want to talk to you about everything because everything was so good.
I'm having a great time. Like, I feel like I don't like I think it's really hard to just like talk about your work with people because you never know like because I'm a bit feral about it, you know? So like I never know like what level of depth. But yeah, I'm happy to
No, we're
do
deep.
all
We're
parts.
very deep. I
Yeah.
think because I've been in a really big reading slump lately, and this just like ripped me out of it and really just threw me into the obsession that I crave when I'm reading. Um, were there any characters as you were writing or as the story developed or any characters that stood out as either difficult to write or really easy to write? Like this one flew right through my mind, no edits, like I'm so confident in who this person is versus I knew I wanted this person to be something and it was hard to get them to that place for whatever reason.
Grey, super easy, weirdly. Grey's adopted mother was really weirdly hard. And I think this is actually kind of like a holdover from YA, in that in YA the parents are a lot more important because they're like actively there for development and things like that. But like an adult, like you can just be like, yeah, I've got parents. What of it? You know? Like just move on.
Yeah.
And so I think it was really interesting for me to kind of poke at her relationship with her adoptive mother. And what I've kind of settled on with it is that they're kind of like more of like an aunt and niece relationship in that she's there, but she's not fully like Grey got a lot more out of Kier's moms, I think, than her own adoptive mom.
Yeah.
Which was yeah, it was just a difficult dynamic to strike because like how much of an importance does this person have on her when she doesn't know like any of the backstory, but still she raised Grey. So I think they're kind of like, yeah, we're cool now, you know, like they just yeah, they get along, they like each other, they love each other, but Grey doesn't tell Amarta everything, and Amarta knows that she's kind of at an arm's length. Other characters that were easy versus hard, Scalus, easy. And ended up getting a lot more screen time than I kind of expected. Cleoc, really difficult.
Okay.
Because I want her, like Cleoc and Sela, to almost be like something for Grey to look at to say, like, this is what my mom and I could have been. Like, it's just like a really difficult relationship for her to parse. And so Grey's relationship with Cleoc is colored by that. And then Scalus was just easy because he's just like a sad man. I don't know, I'm good at sad men.
I did very much love that we got more Scalus and the arc that Scalus had because for so much of the book, Grey is just not sure what to make of this man and because she was so young when she knew him and to just not truly understand his intentions. And then when we got to know him better, I just loved how that dynamic between them played out.
I also love him. He is, I know, I keep talking about the background writing. He is one of the main characters of the novella that I keep poking for my mental health.
Okay. I love
To
that.
hear that.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I love him. He was just really easy, and he's always been really easy. And he's also one of the characters who have existed as long as the concept has existed for like a decade. So I think that kind of contributes to it.
Yeah.
Resilient.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he doesn't get killed.
So I was wondering, so we know this is a series of standalones. So how did you, I guess you are maybe used to writing standalones from the YA horror genre, but you don't see it as much in fantasy where you have a series of standalones. So I just thought that was interesting. I'm wondering about how you decided to, instead of making it one long story where all these different POVs are happening at the same time, how you decided to break it up into 3. Like, just, what are your thoughts on that?
I don't think we see it as much in fantasy anymore. I think it used to be way more common. But also, I think of it both like, I know I keep talking about Kristen Cashore. But Graceling, Fire, Bitterblue, Winterkeep, so forth, do follow that formula of these kind of like interconnected standalones. And I think like we all love a spin-off within reason, of course. So it's conceptually something that I feel like is fairly common. And I also think of T. Kingfisher, like Paladin's Grace and the other Paladin books, and then also The World of the White Rat. So all of those things are these kind of interconnected fantasy standalones. And then, weirdly, I grew up reading the works of Stephen King.
Okay.
So Stephen King has these like interconnected moments between all of his horror novels, and I just thought that was neat when I was a kid and in my like formative brain goo stage.
Yeah.
Just being able to see the kind of connections between these different places and books. And then also with these huge expansive fantasy series, in a lot of cases there will be related series. And I read a lot of romance. Like I read a lot of contemporary romance, and it's, you know, common in romance to be like, well, let's see what's happening to their best friend.
Yeah.
You know, so that was like structurally all of that kind of went into this concept of interconnected standalones, but realistically like I love when I get to set a world and then just stay in it. Even if I'm not staying in kind of the same characters, but we get to, you know, look at things from different perspectives. And I feel like that's, honestly, it's been, I think a lot more fantasy authors want to do this than are currently doing it, because I think it's really hard to be given the keys to be able to do that. And I'm so grateful to my team for being like, yeah, go ahead. And I hope that, you know, Locke doing well or well enough really allows people to be able to do this a little bit more. Just because, yeah, I think this is something that readers do really enjoy, is when they have a world that they can just keep visiting, even if they're looking at it from different entry points. And also from like a, you know, evil, I'm a publisher standpoint, not that publishers are evil, just like the business side of things. You have like a sustained series that has multiple entry points. So you might not see as much of kind of like a series drop off if you could pick it up at any book.
Yeah.
And go from there. So those were kind of all things that were factoring into it, but the main thing is I really like it when my books are connected. So my first two books that I published as YA, books 1 and 2 are in the same world. And so for me as a writer, like that was really interesting to be able to play in the same sandbox and to say like, okay, well, these things are related. I recently went to a festival and V.E. Schwab was speaking. V.E. Schwab was speaking, and she was talking about how Hattie LaRue and Bury Your Bones in the Midnight Soil are related and take place in the same world that she kind of thinks of as the garden. And so there would be other books taking place in that same space. And I think that's such a fun way to look at it conceptually, of establishing a world and staying there and being able to tell different stories within that world. And especially with this situation that we're in with the wider world for these books, every place has a different magic system. So I can just hang out there for a while.
Yeah, well, and too, like, you put so much work into crafting this whole world and making it very developed and intricate. So one, why not spend more time in it? But also, when you have all these kingdoms who have different issues with each other and wars going on between them, like, there's so many different stories you could tell. So
yeah,
we are very happy that you are doing more in the world. When I started Locke, I didn't know that it was a series of standalones, so I thought the quest was going to be like the full book, and then you know, we would get to the stuff that happens later in book 2 kind of thing. So it was a fun surprise. I was like, oh my gosh, like, it's taking me for a ride. I don't know what's going to happen next. Yeah.
But I do love that. And I think like sometimes fantasy readers, or like entry point fantasy readers in a lot of cases, are really daunted by these like huge multi-book series. And though sometimes I love, like, it has to be what mood I'm in, but sometimes I'm like, yeah, I'm here for 4 books. I'm here for 8 books. I'm sat, you know, like, we're here, we're in it. And sometimes I'm like, I want 600 pages that are just a meal. And I want that to be it. And I hope that readers are able to kind of take that away and appreciate that we can still have really expansive fantasy, but with standalone stories. And again, this is something that I really appreciate T. Kingfisher for doing that in a, you know, similar way.
Yeah,
absolutely. I think it's both it's both a great strategic decision, and I'm surprised it doesn't happen more often, but also I think it's great for the reader too. There's a marrying of positive things that come out of creating a world like this for everyone involved, really.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm very curious to see like if it does become more common, because I think it was fairly common in like, I'm gonna be so wrong on this and someone's gonna yell at me in the comments, but I think like 90s and 2000s, like I think this was fairly common, and then we kind of moved into these longer sweeping series. But I hope it is, because as a reader I love that too. I love picking up a book and being like, and that sense of familiarity. And the thing that I'll relate it to is, how much do we love fanfic? Like, and I've never published fanfic as original fiction. Like, I don't have any qualms with it. It's just I've not written fanfic in like a decade. But, I still read it. And I think something that I really love about it is you have that sense of familiarity of this world that you've inhabited, but it's just a new story. And this is kind of like that equivalent of, well, I still kind of know how these things work. I don't have to work that hard on structure or world building, because I kind of know what to expect, even if things are slightly different. But it's that sense that there's already that comfort,
Yeah. I am currently in my fanfic era this year, so I very much relate to that.
It's okay. I feel like 2022, 2023 was like big fanfic years for me.
Love
I think
it.
for the world, honestly.
Yeah.
And now we're seeing the
results.
results of that. Yeah, it's become more to the forefront, which we'll never complain about.
I mean, like, in those years when I was figuring out how to write, when I was like 12 years old cutting my teeth on Twilight fan fiction, I probably did not expect to be here. But yeah, when I was a baby writer, I found that it was like a very helpful way to learn how to write certain aspects of like story structure and characterization without worrying about like the depths of world building.
Yeah. Yeah. Great place to play with the craft.
Yes. The sandbox.
Yes.
Sandbox. I love that. Fanfic is just a big old sandbox.
So, as a fantasy author, what have you been reading lately? What do you always love to recommend to people?
I wrote down the best things I read this year, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they came out this year, but I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, a lot. Okay. So I tried to read as many of the Night books as I could. So some of these are in that topic as well. Brighter Than Scale, Swifter Than Flame by Neon Yang. It's a novella. I loved it. So good. It's about like I'm gonna pitch this so badly, but like an imperial warrior who slays dragons being sent to find a dragon, and then gets very close to the queen of the neighboring country. And I'm gonna leave it there. It's great, and the cover is so beautiful. So that was one. I read. It's so good. Okay, so I read the Odyssey this year.
Oh,
okay.
I read the Emily Wilson translation, and I enjoyed it so much more than I thought I was going to.
Okay.
I read it because I have like a necromancy horror coming out in 2027, which feels like a fake year. And like, it's not an Odyssey retelling, but Greek mythology factors into the system. So I was like, okay, we're reading the Odyssey, we're doing it. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. Unsurprisingly to anyone, The Island, the Silver Sea by Tasha Suri I adored. I've talked about it online so much, so I'm just going to say I loved every second of it. And as someone who lives not where they were born, I cried so many times about just kind of that sense of like, do I belong to this place? Like, where am I? Where do I belong? I cried so many times, and it has incredible found family.
Okay. I've been seeing that one around a lot. It's definitely on the TBR.
It's great. The River Has Roots by Amal El-Matar.
Yes.
Which is it's another novella. I was having a very novella-heavy year. It's a retelling of, and I always mislabel it, it's what is it, The Girl and the Harp? No. Two sisters and a harp are involved. I don't remember what the actual folktale is called. But
I don't think I know either.
It's fine. I don't remember. It's great though. So The River Has Roots. It's beautiful. The physical book has like these really lovely illustrations.
Ooh.
And that like plays into the plot. But then also the audiobook has original compositions. And I think it's the author and her sister like playing them.
Oh, that's so cool.
So like there's something if you're reading it on audio, there's something if you're reading it like as a book, and it's just really lovely. And I just love her writing, so that
She is the author of This Is How You Lose the Time War,
Yes.
right? Yes,
Yeah.
okay. I thought
just,
so.
it's so good. And she's got a short story collection coming out, I think early next year, that I'm really looking forward to. Okay, final two. The Raven Scholar by Antonia Hodgson. I love The Raven Scholar.
I just bought it. It's like very high on my list.
It's so good. It's so good. And it's not romance heavy, but it's one of those like romantic relationships that you're just like, yes.
Yeah.
I loved it. I loved it so much.
Okay.
And if you
Nice.
this is not a spoiler, but if you like this concept of a character haunting the narrative, it's so beautifully done. And my last one, I was really novella heavy this year. The Knight and the Butcher Bird by Alex E. Harrow. Absolutely gorgeous. I love The Everlasting as well. And there's just something about The Knight and the Butcher Bird that was just so like stunningly, gorgeously wrought that I was reading it on vacation and just crying. I was like on like a lawn chair in like Italy being like, don't look at me. Just sobbing. So yeah, I'm a reader who cries a lot. But those were some of my, like half of my tops for the year. I won't give you the full like list because we'd be here forever.
Oh my goodness.
That is amazing. Yeah, I am curious too. There's so many good ones on that list. So many that I have on my list already. So I'm loving to hear that you loved them as well.
Yeah, no. And I have really been getting into novellas just because it's such a, like, it's just a bite, you know?
I feel like it always shocks me how many different stories can come from the same 26 letters of the alphabet. It's just wild to me. Absolutely insane that there's so much available, and like there's something for everyone, and people are creative, and the world is amazing when it's in books.
Words, man.
Yeah.
They're so great.
Well, thank you everybody for listening to this interview, and thank you for joining us, Tori.
Thank you for having me.
Can you tell everybody where they can find you online?
Yes, I am kind of a ghost on the internet at the minute. I'm just really bad at like sticking to platforms. The two that I'm consistent with though are I'm on Instagram as @ToriBovalino, and yes, I do know I write under VL Bovalino. The V is for Victoria, as everyone asked me when I suddenly revealed myself as a Victoria. So yes, it's just @ToriBovalino. And then I also do try to post updates in a monthly newsletter. And the link to subscribe to that is on my Instagram. So that's
Amazing.
fairly easy.
Okay. Well, awesome. I'll be signing up for that immediately so I can get on that, the bonus content.
Need to finish my November letter. Or it's December. December. I need to finish it. It would be bad if I was finishing November.
Yeah, you're a little bit behind.
A little bit.
We wouldn't
Only
blame you though. You're hard at work on providing the goods for us.
Exactly. Writing a bunch of stuff that doesn't end up anywhere.
Who knows? Who knows one day?
Maybe. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was so fun.
Yes, we loved having you on, and everybody listening, go follow her on Instagram and reach out to us on Instagram at paperback.ponderings if you have anything to say.
And read the book.
And read the book if you
haven't.
haven't.
Made it this far and you haven't read the book, I hope that
You are convinced.
You're convinced, because we loved it. So
Yes. We will see you next week.